they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry the cross of Jesus. And they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take. Good morning. This is Pastor Steve Mapp, and I'm so glad that you've joined us this morning for our devotional on this Monday, March the 28th. We've been studying throughout our Lenten season from the book of Mark, a devotion called The Marks of Love. I hope that you've been able to follow along with us. These devotions can be found on our website. So I hope you get an opportunity, if you haven't thus far, to go back and take a look at this series. It's a marvelous series. This morning's passage, I think, is very interesting from a number of standpoints. The first, and where I'd like to spend some time this morning, is talking about this man, Simon of Cyrene, who was compelled or pressed into service by the Roman guards as Jesus was attempting to carry his own cross up this steep hill to be crucified. Now, we don't know much about Simon of Cyrene. This is the only time that he's mentioned in the Bible. All three Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, mention Simon of Cyrene in this passage in this way. Now, we know that Cyrene was an ancient Greek city in present-day Libya. It was founded around 630 BC. But we don't know much about Simon. We think that possibly he was one of the Jews from Cyrene, maybe exiled, a family exiled hundreds and hundreds of years before, who was coming to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover and got caught up in this crowd watching as Jesus was carrying his cross up this hill. We know that on the day of Pentecost, that there was a community of Jews present there, and that the disciples, when they were receiving the Holy Spirit, were able to speak the languages of different nations. And these Jews from Cyrene are one of those nations mentioned. Perhaps Simon was a part of that. I believe that he was. And Mark mentions his sons, Alexander and Rufus. And I think he does so because they served a prominent place, I think, in the early church. Alexander is mentioned in the book of Acts when Paul was in Ephesus and in deep trouble. Alexander was one who wanted to come before all of the people and speak on behalf of Paul. And Rufus is mentioned by Paul in Paul's letter to the Romans in chapter 15, when Paul concludes with what we call the greeting, where he was sending ahead of him in this letter a request for the Christian community to welcome those that Paul had mentioned. And Rufus was one of those. So it seems to me that Rufus and Alexander, the sons of Cyrene, Simon of Cyrene, had an important part to play, and it could well have been because of the role that Simon played in this day of crucifixion for Christ. It's an amazing passage, I think. But to me, one of the really clear messages that we get from this passage this morning, well, it's all about a teaching that we've been receiving throughout the Gospels. It's all about what discipleship, I think, really means. Discipleship comes with a cost, and Jesus lets us know this early on. In Mark chapter 9, he says this: "Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said to them, 'If anyone wants to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all.'" And I think in one of the most amazing parables that Jesus taught, that we read in Matthew chapter 25, it's a parable of the final judgment. When Jesus is seated in his glory, all the nations will be brought before him, and these nations will be separated, sheep on the right and goats on the left, the sheep representing the righteous. And in this parable, Jesus says to those on the right, Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to see me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it for one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." Clearly, Jesus calls all of his followers to servanthood, to denying self and caring for the needs of others. And I can only imagine what Simon must have felt that day when he was pressed into service, perhaps never seeing or hearing of Jesus before, and being compelled that morning to pick up this heavy beam that must have weighed hundreds of pounds and to carry it. I don't imagine that Simon walked up that hill ahead of Jesus. I imagine he walked beside Jesus and perhaps behind him, and he would have seen Jesus torn, beaten, unmercifully, brutally, beaten to within an inch of his life. And I can imagine that Simon must have asked himself, what in the world could this man have done to deserve this treatment? Yes, I can carry the beam for this man, and I will do that. And I suspect that Simon stayed around and was there with the resurrection, and perhaps staying in Jerusalem all of that time until Pentecost. We don't know. But we do know that in that very moment, Simon, not knowing Jesus that we know of anyway, saw the need and picked up that beam and carried it for Jesus. Discipleship comes with a cost. It comes with this denial of self, of denying ourselves and picking up our cross and following Jesus. It calls us to look for the needs of others always before ourselves. Paul, in his letter to the Romans, says this: "Now we who are strong ought to bear the weaknesses of those without strength, and not just to please ourselves. Each of us is to please his neighbor for his good, to his edification." And then in Paul's letter to the Galatians, he makes this statement: "Bear one another's burdens, and thereby fulfill the law of Christ." Imagine that. When we reach out to help another, someone who is weak, someone who is struggling with anything, and we stretch out our hand, we reach in to help, we do whatever we can, that indeed is fulfilling the law of Christ in its fullness. In this little verse this morning about the horrible treatment of Jesus, this Simon of Cyrene picked up the cross and carried it for him. And so I have to ask myself, in my discipleship, in my desire to follow Jesus, am I looking to help another who is suffering? What can I do? What for them is hard to carry? What can I carry for them? What can I give? How can I serve? I think that as followers of Jesus, these are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves all the time. And I'm so glad that Mark put this particular passage in this morning, because it speaks so well to the cost that Jesus asks us to pay as disciples and followers of him. As I conclude this morning, I want to remind everyone that beginning Easter Sunday and for the 40 days following, our church is going to be joining in a 40-day devotional called the Red Letter Challenge. It's a booklet of devotions each day, and our devotions on our website will be devoted to that. Our teachers will be teaching to that, and Dr. Benjamin will be preaching to those devotions. And so I hope that you will stop by the church and pick up your devotion, or if you're attending this week on Easter Sunday and haven't gotten your book, please stop by and pick one up. They're for you, and we really want you to participate in this wonderful devotion with us. Thanks again for joining me this morning. God bless you. God keep you. I look forward to being with you again real soon. Have a great day.